You slept 8 hours. You rested all weekend. Maybe you even took a vacation. And yet, when the alarm rang the next morning, your body still felt heavy, your mind still foggy, your soul still drained. You look at the clock and wonder, how is this possible? I did everything right. I rested. I slept. I took a break. So why am I still tired? The shocking answer is this: because rest isn't enough. Rest doesn't heal what burnout has already broken. And that is the paradox so many people live in every single day. Think about the cycle you know all too well. You push yourself to the limit all week long, promising yourself that the weekend will be your rescue. Saturday comes, Sunday passes, you spend hours in bed, maybe you cancel plans, maybe you even force yourself to do nothing. And then Monday morning arrives, and instead of renewal, you feel the same emptiness, the same heaviness pressing against your chest. It is not weakness. It is not laziness. It is the silent reality of burnout, a condition that rest alone cannot fix. Society has trained us to believe that sleep is the ultimate solution. Just sleep more, they say. Take time off. You'll feel better. But here's the cruel twist. Burnout is not simple tiredness. It is not just physical fatigue. It is emotional exhaustion, mental depletion, spiritual erosion. It runs deeper than hours of rest can touch. And that's why you can close your eyes for an entire night, or even for days, and still wake up feeling like you never stopped working. Burnout lingers in your bones, in your thoughts, in the way you drag yourself through the hours, pretending you're fine when you're not. The truth is that rest is a bandage, not a cure. It soothes for a moment, but the wound underneath keeps bleeding. Imagine a machine that runs non-stop without maintenance. You can switch it off for a while, let it cool, but if the gears are broken, if the system is flawed, turning it back on only brings you back to the same breaking point. That is exactly what burnout does. You keep returning to a system that drains you, a cycle that demands more than you can give, and the rest you manage to steal never truly restores what was lost. And this is where the pain cuts deeper, because when rest doesn't work, the voice inside begins to whisper that maybe you're the problem, maybe you're weak, maybe you don't have enough discipline, maybe you're simply not strong enough to keep up with everyone else. That lie grows in silence, making you believe you're failing at something as basic as recovery. But the truth is far more liberating. You are not failing. You are burned out. And burnout cannot be solved with rest alone. It requires a different kind of awakening, a deeper transformation. It is time to confront the paradox head-on. Rest won't save you if the life you return to after resting is the very one that breaks you down. Sleep cannot erase an environment of constant pressure. A weekend cannot undo years of overwork. A vacation cannot restore what chronic stress has already stolen. And this is why you're still exhausted after resting, because the real wound is not in your muscles or your eyelids. It is in the weight you carry every single day. At this point, if you've felt these words sink into your chest, if you've seen yourself in this cycle, then I ask you to pause for a moment. This channel is built to expose these truths, to reveal what no one else dares to say about burnout. So, before we move forward, take a second to like this video and subscribe, not just to support the work, but to take a stand for yourself, to declare that you will no longer settle for half-truths and empty promises. Your voice, your presence here, matters. And now, I want to leave you with a question that goes beyond exhaustion. If you stopped believing that more rest was the answer, if you dared to look deeper, what would you change about the way you live? Think about it carefully, because your answer might be the first step toward reclaiming your life. Tell me in the comments, what truth about rest and burnout do you now see more clearly than ever before? My name is Christina Maslach, and for decades my life's work has been centered on a single truth that most people are too afraid to confront. Burnout is not solved by rest. I have studied thousands of people across professions, across cultures, across different stages of life, and I have seen one pattern repeat itself with painful consistency. People are told they are lazy. They are told they lack discipline. They are told that if they only slept more, if they only took better vacations, if they only tried harder to relax, everything would get better. And yet, despite sleeping, despite resting, despite doing everything they were told, they woke up tired again. They dragged themselves through the days, holding on to a smile that hid the storm inside. They questioned their worth. They doubted their strength. And slowly, silently, they began to believe the lie that they were somehow not enough. I want you to understand something clearly. This lie, this label of laziness or weakness, is not just cruel, it is dangerous. Because when you are told over and over that the problem is you stop looking at the real problem. You stop questioning the system that demands more than a human being can give. You stop noticing the cycle of endless work, endless pressure, endless expectations that leave no room for true recovery. And once you stop questioning, you internalize the shame. You carry it inside, and it eats away at you in silence. For more than 40 years, I have researched burnout, not as a buzzword, not as a trending topic, but as a psychological reality that has destroyed lives, families, and even entire careers. I have spoken with doctors who gave every ounce of their energy to care for patients, only to collapse behind closed doors. I have interviewed teachers who once lit up classrooms with passion but eventually stared blankly at their students, unable to feel the joy they once carried. I have listened to entrepreneurs who built businesses from nothing, only to find themselves staring at the ceiling in the middle of the night, wondering why success tasted like ashes. And I have sat with parents who sacrificed everything for their children, but in the process lost the ability to recognize their own reflection in the mirror. These were not lazy people. They were extraordinary, resilient, brilliant individuals, but they had been fed a false narrative that if they only rested, they would heal. Here is the truth I discovered after decades of research. Burnout is not about the quantity of rest you get. It is about the quality of life you return to after resting. If you return to a job that drains you, if you return to relationships that suffocate you, if you return to demands that strip away your humanity, then no amount of sleep, no weekend off, no vacation can restore you. The exhaustion is not in your body alone, it is in your spirit. It is in the way you have been asked to sacrifice yourself endlessly in a system that does not see your limits as human, but as flaws to be corrected. This is why so many of you listening right now have felt the sting of waking up tired even after doing everything right, because you are not fighting against sleep deprivation. You are fighting against a culture that glorifies exhaustion and disguises it as strength. You are fighting against expectations that measure your worth by how much you produce, how much you endure, how much you give without ever asking how much it costs you. This is not rest. This is survival dressed up as normal life. And let me tell you why this matters. When you believe the problem is rest, you will keep chasing the wrong solution. You will sleep more. You will take more breaks. You will plan longer vacations. But when none of it works, you will blame yourself. You will look in the mirror and say, "Why am I still tired? Why can't I just get it together?" That self-blame is the weapon burnout uses to keep you trapped. It convinces you to see yourself as broken, instead of recognizing that the system you live in is what has been broken all along. I share this with you not just as a researcher, but as someone who has seen lives rebuilt when the truth is finally faced. I have seen people who once thought they would never feel joy again find laughter returning to their days. I have seen individuals who were told they were failures realize they had been carrying impossible weights and finally choose to set them down. I have seen communities rise together, breaking the silence, saying out loud what so many had been too ashamed to admit, that burnout is not a personal flaw, it is a collective wound. And wounds do not heal in silence. They heal when the truth is spoken. So as you hear my words, I want you to stop and ask yourself, how many times have you believed that rest was the answer, only to feel betrayed by the exhaustion that returned? How many times have you doubted your own strength when the truth was that you had already given more than anyone should ever be asked to give? These questions matter because they begin to break the illusion. They open the door for you to see yourself clearly, not as lazy, not as weak, but as someone who has been carrying a burden too heavy for too long. Now I want to turn this directly to you. Think about your own story. How many times have you pushed yourself, promised yourself that a break would be enough, only to wake up in the same fog, the same emptiness, the same fatigue? And more importantly, what do you think would happen if you stopped blaming yourself and started questioning the demands placed upon you? Leave your answer in the comments, because your story could be the very key that helps someone else realize they are not alone. One of the greatest lies society has ever sold us is the idea that rest will fix everything. From the moment we are children, we are told that if we just go to bed earlier, if we just take the weekend off, if we just book a vacation, all our problems will disappear. We are told that exhaustion is a simple equation, hours of work versus hours of rest. Work too much, rest enough, and balance will magically return. But what happens when you try it and it fails? What happens when you sleep 8 hours, when you cancel plans, when you take time away, and the exhaustion still clings to you like a shadow you cannot shake? You begin to question yourself, not the lie. And that is how the myth of rest keeps you trapped. This myth is powerful because it sounds logical. It's easy to believe that rest is the cure. It's comforting to think that all you need is a little more sleep, a little more downtime, and life will feel better. But here is the truth my decades of research have revealed. Burnout is not a problem that rest can solve, because burnout is not simply tiredness. Burnout is what happens when your energy, your identity, and your spirit have been drained by relentless demands that no amount of rest can erase. Rest soothes the surface, but it does not touch the core. Imagine a person drowning in deep water. Telling them to rest is like telling them to take a breath while they are still under the waves. They don't need a breath, they need to be pulled out of the water. Burnout works the same way. You cannot recover from it by taking a short pause and then diving right back into the same toxic conditions. And yet, this is what society teaches us to do. Work until you break. Take a break. Return. Repeat. It's not recovery. It's recycling exhaustion until it becomes your normal state. The injustice of this lie is staggering. People believe it so deeply that when rest doesn't work, they blame themselves. They think, maybe I'm just weak. Maybe I need more discipline. Maybe I don't know how to rest properly. Think about how cruel that is. Instead of questioning the impossible system, people question their own worth. Instead of recognizing burnout for what it is, they punish themselves with shame. And all the while, the system keeps taking, keeps demanding, keeps benefiting from your silence. This myth also feeds the ego in a destructive way, because no one wants to admit that rest isn't enough. It feels humiliating to say, I took time off and I'm still tired. So we hide it. We put on the mask, pretending that the weekend fixed everything, pretending that a nap gave us back our strength, pretending that we're fine when deep down we know we're not. The ego hates to admit defeat, and so instead of speaking the truth, we play along with the myth. We say, I'm okay, when what we mean is, I'm drowning. But here's the revelation. You are not broken because rest doesn't work. The myth is broken. The promise is false. And the moment you see that clearly, everything begins to change. Rest is necessary, yes. Sleep is important, yes. But they are not cures for burnout. They are pieces of recovery, not the whole picture. If you rest but return to the same life that drained you, nothing changes. The cycle begins again. And that cycle is what destroys people, convincing them they are failing when in truth, they've been set up to fail all along. Think about your own life. How many times have you thought, I just need the weekend, only to arrive at Monday morning feeling exactly the same? How many vacations have you taken where the stress followed you like a shadow, waiting for you the second you returned? How many naps have you taken where you woke up groggy, heavy, unchanged? These moments are not proof of weakness. They are proof of the lie. Proof that the myth of rest has stolen years of your life, making you believe you were healing when in reality you were only treading water. And here is the cruelest part. Society uses the myth to keep you compliant. If you believe that rest is the answer, you will never demand deeper change. You won't challenge the overwork, the toxic expectations, the relentless pace. You'll just keep trying to sleep it off, trying to push through, trying to manage exhaustion privately while showing strength publicly. The myth benefits the system, not you. And that is why it has been sold to you so effectively, because it keeps you quiet. It keeps you ashamed. It keeps you exhausted enough to keep going, but never strong enough to fight back. So I ask you now to confront this myth honestly. Think back to the last time you believed rest would save you. Did it, or did it simply buy you a few hours before the exhaustion came back? And what would your life look like if you stopped believing that lie? Share your truths in the comments, because your story might give someone else the courage to see that their exhaustion was never laziness, never weakness. It was proof that rest alone was never enough. Burnout does not always look like collapse. It does not always announce itself with dramatic breakdowns or public meltdowns. Most of the time, it hides in plain sight, disguised as ordinary tiredness, disguised as simple disinterest, disguised as something you tell yourself you can manage. That is what makes it so dangerous, It is invisible until it has taken so much from you that you barely recognize yourself anymore. And the cruelest part is that even when you notice the symptoms, the world tells you they are just signs of laziness, just proof that you are not trying hard enough. But if you look closely, if you dare to strip away the mask, you will see the truth. One of the most common hidden signs is persistent fatigue. Not just the kind of tiredness that comes after a long day, but the exhaustion that lingers no matter what you do. You sleep 8 hours, you nap in the afternoon, you take time off, and yet your body still feels like it's carrying stones. You wake up in the morning already tired, as though the night did nothing for you. This is not normal tiredness. This is burnout whispering through your body, reminding you that the problem isn't how much you sleep, but what you wake up to face. Another subtle sign is the emptiness that follows achievements. You work hard for weeks or months toward a goal, and when you finally reach it, instead of joy, you feel nothing. You tick the box, you hit the target, you cross the finish line, and the satisfaction lasts for seconds before disappearing into a hollow void. To the outside world, you look successful. To yourself, you feel empty. This emptiness is not laziness, not ingratitude. It is a symptom of burnout, draining the meaning out of things that once brought you life. Then there is the inability to focus. You sit at your desk, your mind wandering, rereading the same words over and over, forgetting why you even opened the document in the first place. People see this and assume you are distracted, undisciplined, lazy. But what they cannot see is the fog that burnout creates, the way it hijacks your brain, making it impossible to concentrate even on tasks you want to complete. This mental fatigue is a hallmark of burnout, and it traps you in cycles of self-blame when, in truth, your mind is not broken, it is overwhelmed. Perhaps the most painful hidden sign is the loss of pleasure. Things you once loved feel heavy. Activities that once gave you joy feel meaningless. Conversations feel like chores. Laughter feels forced. This is not because you no longer care. It is because burnout has numbed your ability to feel. It strips away color, leaving your days gray, making you believe that you have lost yourself when in reality you are simply buried beneath exhaustion. The danger of these hidden signs is how easy it is to dismiss them. You tell yourself it's just a phase. You tell yourself you just need to try harder. You tell yourself that everyone else is handling life better than you, so you must be the weak one. And while you tell yourself these lies, burnout tightens its grip that convinces you that you are alone in this, that no one else feels the same, that you have no right to complain, that silence is what allows burnout to thrive. This is the silent fear, realizing that no matter how much you sleep, no matter how much you achieve, no matter how much you force yourself to keep going, the exhaustion never leaves. It follows you into every morning, into every conversation, into every victory. And the more it hides behind the mask of laziness or weakness, the more you question your own worth. But now that you see these signs clearly, you can no longer dismiss them as laziness. They are proof. Proof that you are not weak, but overwhelmed. Proof that your exhaustion is not a flaw, but a warning. Proof that what you are experiencing is not your fault, it is burnout doing its work in silence. So I want to turn the question to you. Which of these hidden signs have you felt in your own life? Persistent fatigue, emptiness after success, loss of focus, loss of joy. And when did you realize they were not proof of laziness, but signals of burnout? Share your story in the comments, because your words might be exactly what someone else needs to recognize their own truth and finally see that they are not alone in this silent struggle. Burnout has a cruel way of twisting your perception of yourself. When rest fails, when you wake up after hours of sleep and still feel exhausted, the first instinct is not to question the system, it is to question yourself. You think, if rest isn't working, then maybe I'm not working hard enough. Maybe I need to push more, do more, prove more. This is the trap, the invisible snare that burnout lays for you. And once you step into it, the cycle of effort begins. The more you struggle, the harder you push. The harder you push, the deeper you sink. Think about how this plays out in daily life. You wake up tired, but instead of admitting that something is wrong, you tell yourself to toughen up. You force yourself into overdrive, piling more responsibilities onto your already heavy plate. You stay late at work, not because you have the energy, but because you feel guilty for not having enough energy in the first place. You agree to tasks you cannot handle because the fear of being called lazy cuts deeper than the exhaustion itself. You say yes, not because you want to, but because saying no feels like admitting defeat. And so you push harder, hoping that effort will erase the fatigue that rest could not. But the truth is, the more you push, the more you lose. You lose focus. You lose patience. You lose joy. Each extra hour of work doesn't bring you closer to freedom. It drags you deeper into the chains of burnout. Yet the ego convinces you otherwise. It tells you that if you just show enough strength, if you just prove everyone wrong, if you just work harder, you'll finally silence the voices that accuse you of being weak. But that voice is a lie. Because burnout doesn't reward your effort, it punishes it. The most infuriating part of this cycle is how society applauds it. When you sacrifice rest, people call you dedicated. When you stay late at work, they call you committed. When you run on empty, they call you strong. They don't see the price you're paying. They don't see the nights you lie awake with your heart racing, the mornings you wake up already defeated, the moments you look in the mirror and wonder who you've become. They only see the mask of effort, the illusion of productivity, and so the cycle is reinforced, trapping you deeper every time someone praises you for destroying yourself. But deep down, you know the truth. You know that no amount of extra hours will erase the emptiness. You know that pushing harder won't fill the void inside. You know that the voice telling you to do more is the very thing that is breaking you. Still, it's hard to admit, because admitting it means admitting that the rules you've lived by your entire life are lies. It means admitting that society has used your ego against you, exploiting your need to prove yourself, turning it into the very weapon that keeps you enslaved. That revelation stings, but it is necessary. Consider the injustice here. You are told that rest is the answer, but when it fails, the blame shifts onto you. You are told to try harder, to dig deeper, to sacrifice more. And when that fails too, the blame falls on you again. It is a rigged game, one you can never win, because every path leads back to the same conclusion. You are not enough. That is the lie burnout wants you to believe, and it thrives every time you choose effort over truth. The revolt comes when you see it clearly for what it is. The moment you realize that working harder is not saving you, it is destroying you, you begin to feel the anger that was buried under the shame. Anger that you were deceived into believing effort was the cure. Anger that you sacrificed years of your life to a cycle that was never meant to end. Anger that the very traits that made you strong, your determination, your resilience, your willingness to give, were turned against you until they became tools of your own undoing. That anger is not weakness, it is clarity. It is the fire that begins to burn away the illusion. And so I ask you, how many times have you fallen into this cycle, pushing harder and harder, hoping to escape the exhaustion, only to find yourself more broken than before? How many times have you mistaken overwork for strength, when it was really a trap disguised as dedication? Share your answer in the comments, because your story might be the spark that helps someone else see the trap for what it is, and finally step out of the cycle of effort before it destroys them completely. There comes a moment when you can no longer deny the truth, a moment when you realize that sleep will not save you, weekends will not save you, vacations will not save you. The exhaustion you feel is not something that can be erased with naps or days off, because it is not just physical, it is emotional depletion, it is mental overload, it is the erosion of your identity after years of giving too much and receiving too little. This is the breaking point where people either collapse completely or they awaken. And that awakening is what I call the turning point, the beginning of a new way of living. The real path to recovering energy is not about doing more, but about doing less of what destroys you. It is not about sleeping longer, but about refusing to return to the conditions that steal your strength in the first place. Burnout recovery begins not in bed, but in the choices you make when you are awake. It begins when you decide to set limits where there were none. It begins when you recognize that saying no is not weakness, it is power. That choosing yourself is not selfish, it is survival. That protecting your energy is not laziness, is wisdom. For decades, I have studied people across every profession, every background, every stage of life, and I have seen this truth repeat itself again and again. Those who recover from burnout are not the ones who push harder, but the ones who dare to stop pushing at all costs. They are the ones who reclaim control by drawing boundaries. They are the ones who walk away from toxic patterns, even when the world calls them difficult. They are the ones who redefine strength, not as endless endurance, but as the courage to protect what matters most. Think about what that would look like in your own life. Imagine saying no to responsibilities that drain you instead of pretending you can handle them all. Imagine leaving work on time without guilt. Imagine declining a demand that you know will break you. At first, it feels terrifying. Your ego resists. Your fear screams. Society criticizes. But slowly, something shifts. You begin to feel lighter. You begin to feel alive again. Because every no you say to what destroys you is a yes to yourself. A yes to your health. A yes to your future. This turning point is not just about survival, it is about transformation. Because burnout doesn't just strip you down, it also forces you to see what cannot continue. It reveals the cracks in your life, the places where you have been betraying yourself, the sacrifices that have gone too far. And once you see them, you cannot unsee them. That clarity is painful, but it is also liberating. It gives you the chance to rebuild differently, with intention, with strength, with dignity. The courage to take this path does not come from outside applause, because the world will not cheer when you begin to change. People who once benefited from your silence will call you selfish. Systems that relied on your exhaustion will resist your boundaries. Colleagues, friends, even family may push back. But their resistance is not proof that you are wrong, it is proof that you are finally doing something right. It shows that you have stopped feeding the system with your sacrifice and started feeding yourself with truth. Hope begins here. It begins the moment you stop believing that rest alone is the answer and start believing that you deserve more than endless survival. It begins when you realize that energy is not something you recover by lying still, is something you recover by living differently. And when you dare to live differently, you not only heal yourself, you show others what is possible. You become the example that strength is not measured by how much you can endure, but by how boldly you can choose to protect your humanity. So I ask you now to imagine your own turning point. What boundary would change your life if you had the courage to set it? What toxic demand would you walk away from if you stopped fearing the judgment of others? What part of yourself would you reclaim if you dared to stop proving and start living? Share your answer in the comments, because your decision to name that change might be the inspiration someone else needs to begin their own transformation. So tell me, how many times have you thought rest would save you, only to wake up just as tired? How many times did you believe that a weekend off, a good night's sleep, or even a long vacation would restore you, only to find yourself back in the same fog, the same heaviness, the same emptiness? This is the reality no one talks about, the truth that too many people bury deep inside. Rest is not enough. And when you realize this, the question becomes unavoidable. If rest can't save you, what will? Think about the pattern of your own life. You give everything during the week, believing that Saturday and Sunday will put you back together. You take days off, telling yourself you'll feel different when you return. But Monday comes, and nothing has changed. You drag yourself back into the same cycle, weaker than before, wondering why the promise of rest betrayed you again. It's not just disappointing, it's humiliating. It makes you question your strength, your worth, your very identity, and that is the cruelest part of burnout. It doesn't just steal your energy. It convinces you that you are the problem, but you are not the problem. The problem is the cycle itself, a system designed to consume your time, your energy, your humanity, while offering you just enough rest to keep you alive, but never enough to make you whole. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If you keep believing that rest alone will fix you, you will stay trapped in that system forever. That is why this moment is so important, because the only way out begins with a question. If rest won't save you, what will? This is where the provocation cuts deep. Are you willing to admit that sleep, weekends, and vacations are not the solution? Are you willing to face the truth that something more radical is required, that change must happen not in your bed, but in your choices, in your boundaries, in your courage to walk away from what is killing you slowly? It's not an easy answer. It demands honesty, and honesty demands courage. But without it, nothing changes. Community matters here more than ever, because when you admit out loud that rest isn't enough, you give someone else permission to admit it too. You break the silence that keeps people ashamed, the silence that convinces them they're weak for still being tired after resting. Your story has the power to unlock someone else's prison. And when enough of us speak, when enough of us say the truth, the myth begins to crumble. That's when change becomes possible, not just for individuals, but for entire cultures that glorify exhaustion. So I want to turn this to you directly. Reflect on your life. How many times have you pinned your hope on rest, only to feel the same exhaustion the next day? How many times have you blamed yourself for what rest could never fix? And now that you see it clearly, what do you believe is the real step you must take to break free from this cycle? Is it setting a boundary you've been too afraid to set? Is it saying no when the world expects yes? Is it redefining your worth beyond endless productivity? Your answer matters not just for you, but for everyone who reads it, because your words could become the moment of recognition for someone else. Your decision to speak could be the proof they need to believe that they are not alone, that they are not broken, that they are not weak. So tell me in the comments, how many times did you believe rest would save you? And what is the truth you see now about the real path to freedom? There is a truth you must carry with you now. Exhaustion is not your identity, and burnout is not your destiny. The endless tiredness you feel after sleeping, the emptiness that lingers even after time off, the fog that clouds your mind after vacations, all of it is not proof that you are broken. It is proof that you have been surviving in a system that asks too much and gives too little. For too long, you were told that rest would save you. You were promised that sleep, weekends, and holidays were enough to heal what relentless pressure had stolen. But the evidence of your own life tells a different story. You rested, but the exhaustion remained. You tried to reset, but the cycle began again. You blamed yourself, but the truth is this: it was never your fault. Faith is believing in renewal, even when you feel empty. Faith is daring to hope that your best days are not behind you, but ahead of you. And that hope is not naive, it is powerful, because the same exhaustion that once made you question your worth can become the very fire that awakens you to your strength. Burnout is not the end, it is the sign that something must change, and change is possible. You are not trapped forever. You are not condemned to live tired, day after day. You are capable of transformation, and transformation begins with truth. You must understand that energy is not only restored in hours of sleep, it is restored in the choices you make when you are awake. Every boundary you set, every toxic demand you refuse, every time you choose dignity over exhaustion, you are reclaiming your energy. Recovery is not about resting more, but about living differently. It is about daring to say no. It is about daring to stop proving your worth through sacrifice. It is about daring to believe that you deserve a life that does not drain you to survive. Inspiration is born the moment you realize you are not alone. Millions of people around the world have walked the same path, carrying the same silent exhaustion, believing the same lies. But when even one voice speaks the truth, the silence begins to break, and when the silence breaks, healing begins to spread. Your story, your courage, your choice to speak can give someone else permission to rise. And together, step by step, we begin to create a culture that no longer glorifies exhaustion, but honors humanity. Do not underestimate the power of this moment. Right now, as you hear these words, you stand at a crossroads. One path leads back into the cycle, resting, returning, breaking, blaming. The other path leads forward toward change, toward strength, toward renewal. That path will not always be easy, but it will be worth it. Because on the other side of burnout is not emptiness, is clarity. On the other side of exhaustion is not defeated, is freedom. On the other side of shame is not weakness, is the rediscovery of your true worth. If these words resonated with you, if you felt something stir inside, I invite you to take a simple step, like this video and subscribe to this channel, not just as an action on a screen, but as a declaration of intent, a declaration that you refuse to keep living in silence, that you are ready to embrace truth over lies, strength over shame, renewal over exhaustion. By joining this community, you are aligning yourself with countless others who believe in transformation and who refuse to let burnout define their lives. And prepare yourself for what comes next, because this journey does not end here. In the next video, we will go even deeper, uncovering the hidden reasons why modern life keeps so many people trapped in exhaustion, and how you can begin dismantling those forces piece by piece. What you will discover there may be the missing piece you have been searching for, the insight that could finally set you free. Stay with us, because your next chapter begins now, and together, we will step into it with faith, with inspiration, and with the unshakable certainty that you were never lazy, never broken, you were always stronger than you knew.